Yep. Feels good, don't it? Yeah. Yes, sir. Welcome to the Thursday edition of the Hype Show. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. I am Big J all day, aka the Mighty Big J. Again, this is the Hype Show, and I thank you so much for joining me here. As if this is your first time coming to the channel, please like and comment on this video and also subscribe to the channel as well. And if you're not new, thank you again for joining me for doing this another broadcast here. This is episode 13 of the Hype Show. It's an abbreviated episode. My Thursday episodes are much more abbreviated typically than Sunday and Thursday. We're going to get basically into the Thursday night football game between the Denver Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs. That'll be taking place 8:15 Eastern on Prime Video. We'll discuss that and have predictions for that. We'll also look ahead and go over the games that are going to be taking place during Week 6 this coming Sunday and Monday. And we'll also have an update on the Major League Baseball playoffs and kind of let you know how things are shaking there. The ALCS has been set, and half of the NLCS has been set. We'll have to find out who guys going to be in that other half, and we'll touch on that briefly before we close out the show here. So as I said here, tonight's game here, that's going to be the Denver Broncos traveling to G-Ha Field at Arrowhead Stadium to visit the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, that's 8:15 p.m. Eastern on Prime Video. If you're in Denver, that game will be actually on Channel 7 KMGH. And if you're in Kansas City, that game will be on television as well in your local markets as well. Otherwise, you'll have to have Prime Video to see the game. The Kansas City Chiefs are favored by 10 points. It was 12.5 earlier this week, but now it is down to 10 points for some odd reason. 10.5 actually is the favor now. Travis Kelce was said to be questionable for this game. He did leave briefly the game earlier this week for their Week 5 matchup against the Minnesota Vikings. He did leave the game briefly because he tweaked his ankle a little bit, but he came back a quarter later to score a touchdown. So he's listed as questionable for tonight, but it's looking like he's probably going to play. They haven't ruled him out or anything, and he was able to get limited practice in this week. So he's probably going to be good to go. We'll know more closer to game time. The Broncos have lost 15 games in a row to the Kansas City Chiefs, and they're on their 6th head or interim coach since the last time they beat the Kansas City Chiefs. That's crazy. Super crazy. The Kansas City Chiefs are 4-1 with a 1-1 home and record, and the Denver Broncos are 1-4 with a 1-1 away record. Their actually only win came on the road, and they're 0-3 at home. I honestly just don't see the Denver Broncos winning this football game. They actually just announced earlier today that they restructured the contract for Frank Clark. And so they're looking to either trade or release him based on the amount of money that he gave back. He gave back about $1.7 million of his salary. And so they're either looking to find a trade for him or probably flat out release him. They found a trade for Randy Gregory last week, and they said that they were actually going to be releasing him, but that didn't turn out to be the case. And it's looking like a fire sale in Denver. If it's a situation where they fall to 1-5, it would be virtually impossible for them to make the playoffs, in my opinion, honestly. So, based on tonight and the next couple of games after that, we'll just have to see what the Broncos are going to do. But in my opinion, it's going to be rough. If the Broncos can keep this game close, that might be respectable to a certain extent. But if the Kansas City Chiefs get going and they're up by like 14 points, 14-0 early, or like 17-3, something of that nature, I just don't see the Broncos climbing out of that hole. Because while the offense for the Denver Broncos has been better than last year, they're actually scoring 8 more points a game than they were this time in the 2022 season when they were averaging like 15, 16 points a game. So they're scoring more. But on the flip side, they're giving up 14 more points on defense than they gave up this time of last year. So that's still a 6-point deficit if you're the Denver Broncos. So you got the offense to improve, but the defense fell apart. And this has to be said. Vance Joseph, last season for the Arizona Cardinals, their defense was 31st out of 32 teams. How is that going to make things better? There was a point in the season in 2022 where the Denver Broncos had the best defense in all of football, but they had the worst offense in all of football statistically by points and yardage. They were 32nd in offense, but they were number one in defense. I believe it was about week 8 or week 9 of last season, so right in the middle of the season. If they were to have had that defense last year with this year's offense, they would be probably 3-2. Me personally, Vince Joseph, I don't he didn't work as the head coach for the Denver Broncos prior to Vic Fangio coming on. And he's never been a great defensive coordinator. The best defense he's ever had as far as ranking in his career was 17th. That's still bottom half of the league. So the Denver Broncos to me, they're probably looking at next season already. I know we're only 5 games in. This will be 6 after tonight, but it's just rough. And what's making it harder for this turnaround to occur is because you gave up so much to get Russell Wilson in the first place in 2022, and then you made a trade to get Bradley Chubb to the Miami Dolphins week 5 of the 2022 season, and you got a first round pick from Miami via the San Francisco 49ers with another transaction they did. And then, excuse me, you had to turn around and give up that first round pick to get Sean Payton as your coach. So in reality, you're working backwards, in my opinion, even with the good intention of trying to be a better team and be a better organization going forward. And I just don't feel like they know exactly what they want to do. They've thrown stones in a lot of different ponds, and they've all just sank to the bottom. And none of them have skipped. And I just honestly don't know, looking at this team, what you can do. Russell Wilson, and I've stated this in previous broadcasts, Russell Wilson's extension that he signed in March when he came to the team, that doesn't kick in until the 2024 season. The 2022 season and the 2023 season are the seasons from the Seattle deal that he signed. He had signed a 5-year deal prior to the 2019 season. So 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. They were only 3 years into a 5-year deal when they traded him. So the Denver Broncos are paying him for those 2 years, most of it. I think Seattle had to pay a little bit of that this year, but after that, they're done. And so you're the Denver Broncos, you're on the hook for that bill. Like everybody else left dinner and you're sitting there with the receipt in front of you, you gotta pay. And it's just really unfortunate that that's the case because I think we may have seen the best of Russell Wilson. I just don't see him getting any better. I really don't. Because the best of Russell Wilson was accompanied by a great defense. And last year, even with a great defense, the offense wasn't working because of the play calling and because of the novice on that side of the football. This year, the offense is playing better, but he's not being aided by a great defense. So I don't know. Even if the Broncos do have a high draft pick, which way do you go? Because they tried to fix the offensive line when they signed Ben Powers from Baltimore and when they signed Mike McGlinchey from the 49ers. They were trying to fix the offensive line. That didn't work. You've drafted Javonte Williams out of the backfield. You signed Samaje Perine. You have Jaleel McLaughlin as an undrafted free agent. So you've tried to address the running back situation. Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, the multiple wide receivers they've drafted, you've tried to address that. And so far, to me, this is my opinion, the best wide receivers on the Broncos, as far as how they looked over the season, to me, have been Marvin Mims Jr. and Brandon Johnson. I'm still waiting for Jerry Jeudy to amaze me. I just don't really see it with him. And Cortland Sutton he's a fine receiver. He's not great, but he's not just garbage. He's just fine. He is what he is. So if you're the Denver Broncos, you got a lot of decisions to make. You really do. As far as Kansas City, it's as I've always stated with them before, it's Super Bowl or bust. It's like get to the championship game or bust. They've been in the last 5 AFC championship games dating back to 2019. The 2018 Chiefs were in the 2019 game, so 2020, 2021, 2022, and then the 2022 Chiefs were in the AFC game this past January. So that's 5 in a row, and they've won 4 of them. I'm sorry, they've won 3 of them, excuse me. Looking at their schedule, after they play the Broncos tonight, I have that as a victory for the Chiefs. And then they're home against the Los Angeles Chargers 10 days later at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on October 22nd. That'll be their Week 7 matchup. They're at the Denver Broncos again for Week 8, October 29th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern. They have their international game coming up with the Miami Dolphins on November the 5th. That'll be at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. That game is being played in Germany at Frankfurt Stadium. And then the following week, they'll be back home against the Philadelphia Eagles. Actually, after their bye week, they have a bye week following the Miami game. Then they'll be home against the Philadelphia Eagles November 20th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern from Monday Night Football. So, as I previously stated, the after this Denver stretch, I could see them having a tough time with the Dolphins possibly because I don't know what that offense is going to look like without Devin A-Chain, the running back, being out. And the Philadelphia Eagles game, that'll be a little deeper into the season, and like I said, things can happen from a week to week basis. So I genuinely don't know for sure what Kansas City will look like come Philadelphia because the Kansas City Chiefs, the only thing that I worry about is their receiving core. Now, they've won before without an amazing receiving core, but you had at least one guy outside of Travis Kelce and outside of your running back core that could catch the ball with consistency down the field. Even last year, when they traded Tyreek Hill to the Miami Dolphins prior to the 2022 season, you still had guys on the outside that were able to catch the ball really well. They had Juju Smith-Schuster on a one-year deal last year, and he was really good for him in going in that Super Bowl. He played really well. It's not really working out for him in New England this year, but he was pretty solid last year. They brought over Kadarius Toney via trade, and he's been pretty bad. He dropped three balls in their first game against the Detroit Lions, and he hasn't really gotten a lot of routes and a lot of targets this year. Rashee Rice, he's a rookie wide receiver. He was drafted in the second round out of SMU. He actually leads the team with 4 dropped passes. So I just look at the Kansas City Chiefs and I look at their receiving core, and that's really the only thing that scares me. Marquez Valdez Scantling, technically speaking, would be your number one receiver. And he was never the number one receiver when he was with the Green Bay Packers at any point. So that just, I don't even feel like he's a number two receiver. Like he would be a number 2B, maybe a 3 wide receiver to me. He just doesn't scare me. Sky Moore, he has potential, but he's got the yips too. He likes to drop the ball in key moments as well. So when I look at Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, Rashee Rice, and Justin Watson, even none of those guys scare me at the wide receiver position. And that's why with Travis Kelce being questionable at any point or being out, that's why this offense struggles because at that point he starts to trust Isaiah Pacheco, the running back out of Rutgers. He starts to trust him. This is his second season, and he showed a lot last year as a rookie. He's going to trust Isaiah Pacheco, and then he's going to probably trust Jerick McKinnon next after that because Jerick McKinnon, he's an experienced guy, and he's been with the team. This is his third year with Kansas City now. So if the wide receivers can't get it going, and if Travis Kelce ever misses it, those are like going to be his main targets, and you can't consistently throw out of the backfield to your running backs. So that's the one thing I'm going to be looking for with the Kansas City Chiefs. That's the only question I have is how are these receivers going to step up? Are any of these receivers going to have one of those games where you can say, "Oh, okay, so if Kelce is doubled or if he's covered over the middle, I can go to this. I can go to this guy." We've seen Patrick Mahomes make a lot of magical moments happen, but you have to have the guys in place to do that. And that's just the only thing I worry about with the Kansas City Chiefs. Their defense is actually a lot better than I suspected, and with Chris Jones coming back, that's always going to make it a situation where that front line is going to do what it needs to. Also, the Chiefs are getting Nick Bolton back here. He was out the last few weeks with an injury, and he's going to be back and active for tonight's game. So that's going to help out the defense as well. But when not with the Chiefs, I'm not really worried about them. I'm just not. The Chiefs, as far as I'm concerned, in the standings, the only team in the AFC that's on par with it is Miami, and those two teams play each other down the road. So we'll see who's going to be the better of the two when they go head to head. But as far as the league itself, the only teams I would even put over Kansas City are San Francisco and Philly, and that's solely based on their records. Those are 5-0 teams. So I got the Chiefs still ahead of the Dolphins as far as I'm concerned. The Dolphins look like a great team, and I may have jumped the gun a bit by calling them the best team in the NFL by the way that they beat the Broncos a couple weeks ago. Because that following week they took an L to the Buffalo Bills in quite convincing fashion. So I just may have jumped the gun with the Dolphins. So I'll say they're second best in the AFC. And as far as the overall NFL, I would put them in my top 5 because I would say the Detroit Lions are better than the Miami Dolphins at this time too. I feel like if they went to head to head, I would take the Lions. So, yeah, regarding Kansas City, like I said, those are the only questions I have is whether their wide receivers are gonna be able to step up and do what they need to. Looking at the Denver Broncos schedule, let's go back to them and kind of take a look at their 5 games that they got coming up here. As I said tonight, I have them losing to the Chiefs. 10 days later, they're home against the Green Bay Packers, October 22nd, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then the following week, they're home again against the Kansas City Chiefs, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they hit their bye week, week 9. Week 10, they're at the Buffalo Buffalo Bills, excuse me, for Monday Night Football, November 13th at 8:15 p.m. Eastern. And then 6 days later, they're home against the Minnesota Vikings for Sunday Night Football, and that's November 19th at 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. I said this before, and it makes me wonder what Minnesota will be as well because they're not going to have Justin Jefferson for 4 weeks. And with that game, it makes me wonder what the Minnesota Vikings will even be 5, 6 weeks from now. Will they have traded Kirk Cousins away? Will Jefferson will be back? Will they be able to weather the storm of not having him? Because this will be the first time he's missed any extended time in his 3-year career with the Vikings. So it'll be interesting to see if that Denver Broncos Minnesota Vikings game even stays as the Sunday night football. Because by that point in the season, they have what's called flex scheduling, typically after week 10, and they can move that game out of there. Like, nah, this isn't going to work as far as viewership. Let's get this bad boy out of here and put in a different game. So, like I said, the Denver Broncos, as far as I'm concerned, they're gonna lose these Kansas City games and that Buffalo game even after a bye week because I just don't have any indication that they're a good team. The defense is last in pretty much everything, and they were a first place defense last year. They didn't lose guys like that. It's coaching. The coach is not. He's not the guy for that. Vance Joseph is not a good DC. And it's crazy to me that I had any kind of high hopes for him. He's just not the guy. That's just all there is to it. He's just not the guy. All right, so switching gears here, there's another game I'm actually going to talk about here because by the time I'm on Sunday, this game will already be taking place. It's the game internationally taking place in London at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Sunday, October 15th. That's at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. This game is between the Baltimore Ravens and the Tennessee Titans. The Baltimore Ravens are favored by 4 points to win this football game, but when it's a situation where both teams are traveling across the country or across the world, sorry, like that overseas, that's a situation where it's almost like a pick 'em. There's really no advantage in this particular game for me. I felt like Jacksonville, and I stated this previously, I felt like Jacksonville had an advantage by being over in London for 2 straight weeks. With their victory over Atlanta, they stayed that entire week, and while Buffalo was in town playing the Miami Dolphins that same week, and then they had to travel to London, and they had to get themselves acclimated to that atmosphere and being hours ahead in England. So I honestly felt like the Jaguars were able to take advantage of that, and I stated in my previous broadcast I thought that Buffalo would win if they played on the United States soil, whether it was Buffalo or Jacksonville. So to me, this game is going to be more of a situation of who plays better. There won't be any particular advantage in this game. The Baltimore Ravens, that game that they lost last week to Pittsburgh was disappointing because they allowed Pittsburgh's defense to dictate what Lamar Jackson was able to do. It's his first game all season where he didn't have a touchdown running or passing the football. So that they dominated that game and it was a low scoring affair like they typically like it. So as far as this game goes, I'm looking for Baltimore to bounce back and get the victory over Tennessee. Tennessee, to me, they've had ebbs and flows as well, but a lot of that is more to do with the quarterback play and also the amount of production that Derrick Henry has. If Derrick Henry isn't running the football or moving the football in a fashion that helps them with the clock, they lose football games because in the 2 wins they've had, Derrick Henry went ham on the opponent. He went crazy and ran the football really well. In the 3 games that they lost the game, not only did Derrick Henry not do what he needed to do on the ground, but Ryan Tannehill turned the ball over multiple times. So it's just been up and down. They've literally they lost their first game, they won their second game. They lost their third game, 27-3 to Cleveland. and they turned around and won their week 4 game 27-3 against the Bengals. Then at the Colts last week, even with Richardson being injured, Anthony Richardson being injured and out for the Colts managed to squeak by with a win by Gardner Minshew, 23-16. So they've literally been up and down all season. They don't even have a 2-game winning streak or a 2-game losing streak. It's just L dub, L dub. So if they were to win this game, they would put them at 4-2. And in all honesty, I just don't know if it's a situation where I can see the Tennessee Titans doing much as far as the team, and as far as the Titans go in the AFC South, even though that division is very muddled, I still could see them losing out somehow because the AFC, the way the other divisions look, there's only going to be one team that comes out of the AFC South, and it'll be the division winner. So, after this Baltimore game, like I said, let's look at Tennessee's schedule really quick, and then we'll go back to Baltimore and see what their games look like. After this game against Baltimore, they'll have the bye week for week 7. Then on October 29th, the Titans will be home against the Atlanta Falcons at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they have to travel to Pittsburgh for Thursday Night Football at 8:15 p.m. Eastern on Prime Video, November 2nd. 10 days later, they'll be at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers November 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they're at Jacksonville November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS as well. So this is the deal. Tennessee, the sad part is I wouldn't be shocked if they actually found a way to beat Baltimore because Baltimore has some injuries all over their team as well. And if they can find a way to exploit that, especially on the defensive side of the ball, they can win the game. I don't know what Tennessee's defense is going to look like against Baltimore as far as that aspect. But if Tennessee can play sound football on offense, that can be the key for them to win that football game. I'm still going to take Baltimore, but if Tennessee wants to win this game at all, they got to play great defense, and Derrick Henry has to run the football really well. That's what they'll have to do if they want to win this football game. But I'm taking the Baltimore Ravens. After the bye week, they're going to be home against Atlanta again on the 29th. I would take them to win that football game. At Pittsburgh, that's a dicey situation. That's going to be tough. That defense is still playing really well. And even with the offense that Pittsburgh has, it's comparable to Tennessee's except for the running back position because I just don't really like Najee Harris's production this year or last year. He was much better as a rookie in 2021. And Jalen Warren is starting to pick up and look really well as well, but there's no consistency there in their running game at the moment. So Pittsburgh, to me, would win this game over Tennessee with defense. 10 days later, Tennessee, they would be on their second road game in a row at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the 12th, and then they're at Jacksonville, so the 19th. I could see them splitting those games, honestly, the Tennessee Titans. So if the Tennessee Titans hypothetically went 2-3 at that point over their next 5 games, that would put them at 4-6 with 11 weeks gone because of the bye week. So that would have them at 6 games left or 7 games left, excuse me. And it's just kind of a mixed bag, and their schedule down the stretch gets a little tougher. They still have to play the Miami Dolphins and the Seattle Seahawks later in the year. They still haven't seen Houston twice. They're going to see them 2 of the last 4 games of the season. And I honestly, the way Houston's been playing, I could see them splitting with Houston. I'll have an official prediction further down the road for those games, but just the way things are looking, Tennessee is going to hang around like 500 football or just be slightly below. So with Tennessee, I just don't know if they're going to do anything this year. And with Baltimore, they've let go of a couple of games that they needed to have. The Indianapolis game definitely jumps out because I had them winning that game a couple weeks ago. The Pittsburgh game, that's like that. When Baltimore and Pittsburgh play that, it's a physical game. So with Baltimore, looking at after they defeat the Tennessee Titans, they would have the Detroit Lions at home October 22nd at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're at the Arizona Cardinals October 29th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they're home against the Seattle Seahawks November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern CBS. Then they're home against the Cleveland Browns November 12th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Again, that's another AFC North matchup. Those matchups are usually pretty physical. With Baltimore, I'm just optimistically speaking, looking at their games they got coming up, I could see them being 3-2 With Tennessee, Arizona, and Cleveland, those look like games that they could take, but Detroit and Seattle may be tougher, even though they're home for both of those games. Those are the two of the top five teams in the NFC as far as I'm concerned. So, again, much like with with the Tennessee Titans, we'll have to see what they are. But I'm taking Baltimore to win this international game, and then on the Sunday broadcast, I'll have an update for you as to how that game is going and how it shakes out there for you. So, before we close out here, I'm gonna read off the schedule for the rest of Sunday's games. Here's Sundays and the Monday night football game as well. And then we'll give an update on the Major League Baseball playoffs and kind of see how things are squared up there for you here. All right, so looking at the rest of the schedule for October 15th, the Washington Commanders will be heading to Atlanta to face the Atlanta Falcons. That game will be taking place at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Another 1 p.m. Eastern game taking place will be the Chicago Bears hosting the Minnesota Vikings. Each team is 1-4 and definitely needs a win. That game will be taking place at Soldier Field in Chicago. Another game on the docket for 1 p.m. The rest of these are all 1 p.m. Eastern games until I specify. The Cincinnati Bengals will be hosting the Seattle Seahawks, who came off of their Week 5 bye. That game will be taking place at Paycor Stadium in Cincinnati, Ohio. The Cleveland Browns will be hosting the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers are at 5-0. The Browns are also coming off of a bye week as well at 2-2. They'll be hosting that game at their stadium in Cleveland. The Miami Dolphins at 4-1. They'll be hosting the Carolina Panthers, who are the only winless team left in the NFL at 0-5. That game will be taking place at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, Florida. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they'll be hosting the Indianapolis Colts at Everbank Stadium. That game will be taking place 1 p.m. Eastern. That game will be their first game in 3 weeks back on United States soil. Again, they spent their last 2 weeks in London for their last two games and were able to come out 2-0. So that's pretty good for them. The Houston Texans in the last 1 p.m. Eastern game, they'll be hosting the New Orleans Saints. That game will be taking place at NRG Stadium in Houston, Texas. The first and only game at 4:05 p.m. Eastern will be the Las Vegas Raiders hosting the New England Patriots at New England at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, Nevada. The Raiders are actually favored by 3, and I think even though the Raiders aren't that great, it should be higher because the Patriots have been a bad, bad team this year. So I could see that being a whooping. The Los Angeles Rams will be hosting the Arizona Cardinals. The Rams are 2-3. The Cardinals are at 1-4. That game will be taking place at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California. The New York Jets at 4:25 p.m. Eastern will be hosting the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles are 5-0. The Jets improved to 2-3 with their win over Denver. That game will be taking place at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. The Eagles are favored by 7 points. That's probably about right. We'll have to see if it's more, but they typically beat their teams by anywhere from 7 to 10 points this year. So far, there hasn't really been any huge blowouts by them yet. The game taking place for Sunday Night Football will be the Buffalo Bills hosting the New York Giants. That game will be taking place at 8 p.m. Eastern. CBS on the 15th, and that'll be at Hard Rock Stadium in Orchard Park. Buffalo is favored by more than 2 touchdowns at about 14.5. So I could see that happening. Daniel Jones, they're expecting him to play. He did leave the game previously with a neck issue, and they are expecting him to play. But we'll just have to see how that's going to happen. And the Monday night football game that'll be taking place, the Los Angeles Chargers coming off of their bye week will be hosting the Dallas Cowboys, who fell unfortunately to the 49ers by quite a bit last week and then fell to 3-2. That game will be taking place at SoFi Stadium, and that's at 8:15 p.m. Eastern on Monday, October 16th to close out Week 6. The teams that are not playing Week 6 are the Green Bay Packers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have the bye this week. They're the only two teams not playing. So that's how that's going to look as far as the NFL schedule. And then, like I said, on Sunday, I'll have more in-depth details for all of these games, and I'll have a prediction for you, and then kind of lay out the rest of how those games are going to look for those teams as well here. One more topic we're going to touch on this abbreviated episode before we get out of here. We're going to touch on the Major League Baseball playoffs here and kind of get you up to speed on what the schedule looks like and what the scores are as far as the games here. There's only one game taking place here tonight. That game will be taking place at 8:07 p.m. Eastern, so about an hour or so now. The Philadelphia Phillies were going to be home for Game 4, hosting the Atlanta Braves in the National League Division Series. This is Game 4, and Philadelphia leads the series 2-1 and can close out the Braves tonight with a victory. With a victory, they would be heading to their second straight NLCS, and they would be facing the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Arizona Diamondbacks yesterday, they swept out the Los Angeles Dodgers. They won the game by a final of 4 games to 2 to win the first games of that series and thus end the series by sweeping the Dodgers. And if you're a Dodger fan, that's just a in a hurry elimination, and it just wasn't expected. I thought that the Dodgers and Diamondbacks would go at least the 5 game distance, possibly because of how Arizona was playing, but not the case, and it's just another early exit for the Dodgers. So, like I said, the winner of tonight, if the Phillies can get the win tonight, they'll knock out the top seeded Atlanta Braves, and they'll end up going to the NLCS for a second straight year and hosting the Diamondbacks. So that would be nuts if the Philly wins this, but at the same time, it really would be on a strong run last year to get themselves to the World Series. I know Houston won it in 6, but the Phillies did this last year too, so not truly shocking. And ironically, in the NLDS, they beat the Atlanta Braves to get to the NLCS. So it's gonna be an interesting night. We'll have to see. On the flip side of things here, the ALCS is set. Everything is set for the American League Series. And looking at that series, that's going to be the Houston Astros going toe to toe with the Texas Rangers. Me personally, I think that's going to be very intriguing because these teams know each other really well. And one thing that I said about the Rangers with their ALDS series with the Baltimore Orioles before it took place was that I know the Baltimore Orioles won 101 games, but I just don't know if they're ready as far as playoffs and as far as taking it to the World Series. And I was proven right, unfortunately, because the Rangers are a much more experienced team, even though they didn't have as many victories, and they swept Baltimore right out. They swept them out with no type of issues whatsoever. So it just doesn't surprise me that Texas is here. They were one of the top teams to start the year, along with the Tampa Bay Rays. It's just the Rays kind of fizzled out that towards the end with injuries and players not being there. On the flip side for the Astros, they're probably the most experienced team left. At this point, I would have said the Dodgers or the Braves, depending on what happens with the Braves and Phillies tonight. But they're probably the most experienced team left, and with them being the defending World Series champions and getting that tiebreaker over Houston, I think they may have a slight edge over the Texas Rangers. Game 1 of that ALCS is not until Sunday, October 15th, and that game will be taking place at 8:15 PM Eastern on Fox. So that series starts October 15th, and that'll give those guys some rest. And then depending on what happens tonight, the next baseball game that we will see will not be until Saturday if there is a game 5 between Atlanta and Philly. So we're getting down to the wire here in baseball. And as you know, October is where everything gets pumping and gets crazy for baseball. And we'll get a couple steps closer to seeing who's going to be in the World Series. I'll be touching on baseball again on Thursday to give you an update and let you know what's happened as far as those games and as far as who's going to be doing what. But again, based on tonight, we'll have to see if the Phillies can get to the NLCS or if the Braves can push this series out one more game. Me personally, looking at who's left, I've always been kind of like the Dodgers are gonna get their type of guy, but it's really stunning how Arizona smacked them like that. It's really stunning. So if it's a situation where it's the Diamondbacks and the Phillies in the NLCS, I would take the Phillies to win that. But you never know. October baseball is just crazy. So, like I said, I'll have an update for you guys on that coming up on the next broadcast that I do Thursday for you. But all right, that is going to wrap things up here for today's Thursday edition of the Hype Show. Remember, that game between the Kansas City Chiefs hosting the Denver Broncos will be taking place in a little more than an hour from now. That's 8:15 PM Eastern on Prime Video. And I'll be touching on the highlights of that game to lead Sunday's broadcast, and I will be updating you on the international game going on between the Ravens and Titans because that game will be already going by the time I jump on here for you. Like I said, I'll have more detail for you also, as well as all the games going on Sunday for the Week 6 matchups, and I'll also have it, how I feel about the Monday night matchup that's going to be happening as well for you. But thank you so much again. Thank you for another episode of the Hype Show, and thank you for joining me here. Make sure that you like and comment on this video. And again, if you're new to the channel, please be sure to subscribe. I definitely need all the subscriptions I can get. That definitely helps me out, and that definitely gets you in the algorithm. But again, thank you so much here. And this is the Hype Show. You have a good one. Thank you.